All right, welcome to another episode of the New England Endurance Podcast. I'm your host, Art Trapotsis, and today I'm thrilled to have George Munger, the director of the Tufts University rowing program and also the men's head coach with us. And in case you haven't heard, the Tufts rowing program has been on absolute fire the last couple of years, maybe longer. And under George's leadership, Tufts rowing has become one of the most respected and successful programs in New England, if not the country, consistently producing fast crews and fostering a culture of excellence and camaraderie. And I'm particularly excited about chatting with George because I'm a former rower myself back in the mid to late 90s when Gary Caldwell was running the program. I had a chance to go to Henley back then, and it really set up my passion for endurance sports for the rest of my life, basically. And recently I had an opportunity to row with some of the athletes from the program as part of the alumni rowing day they had, which was really fun. And it made me appreciate the program even more. So whether you're a current rower or former rower or coach or just someone who's into endurance sports, I think you will enjoy hearing how George and his team have built something special at Tufts. So welcome, George, to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So I'm trying to figure out where to kick off. I'd actually like to kick off a little bit with just talking about the recent success you folks have had. So I printed out some of the rowing achievements. I'm going to start with the women's program with head coach Lily Siddall. And correct me if I'm wrong and jump in here, but we're back-to-back NCAA Division III national champs, 24 and 25.
Yep.
They were first at the National Invitational Rowing Championships in 2024. Plus, there were a bunch of titles in the other, not just the first eight, but the third eight and the fourth eight. Is that true? And the novice eight for the women?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, that's incredible. And then they won head of the Charles in 2023 or swept all the varsity races. Am I missing anything? This is like an incredible program.
Yeah, I think that's the majority of it. I know they won the Charles this fall as well.
Okay.
At NIRC this year as well, to win the NESCAC Women's Rowing Championship too.
Oh, fantastic. And then the men's side, which was your program. So this year you guys won the IRA Division III championships, and I heard you won the points race, which I don't quite know all about it, but it means that like multiple boats have to do really well.
Yeah, so there are two different scoring formats at the IRA. The national championship is decided by the men's varsity, which we got second in, but then there's also a team trophy, which is the combined points between the first and the second eight. And by virtue of our first eight getting second and our second eight winning, we were able to win the team trophy at the IRA for the first time.
That's incredible. And then National Coaching Staff of the Year. This was news to me. I'm going to name some names. So in addition to you, George, we had Andy McLaughlin, Peter Malinowski, Jacob Wellborn, and Grady Van Orden.
Yep. Yeah. And those are some great guys. We had, so Pete Malinowski was on the squad. He actually rowed for 4 years for us and then coached for 4 years for us. And he didn't coach with us last year, but he and Andy and Jacob in the 2023-2024 season also won Staff of the Year. So this is a repeat for them for last year. Andy and Jacob, and then Grady was the new face to the group on the men's side this year. And also to note that the women won the NCAA Staff of the Year and Lily won Head Coach of the Year for D3 NCAA women as well.
Man, I got to find out what you guys are doing over there. But let me just finish. So you also won head of the Charles Collegiate Eights in 2023.
Yeah.
And that's when like Tufts started becoming back on my radar. Like I heard that through the Instagram portal and I was like, oh man, what's going on at Tufts? And then 2025, you won nationals and you won all 4 varsity eights. Do I have that right?
So in 2025, we were on the podium in all of all the events at the National Invitational. So the varsity got third, the 2V got second, the 3V got third, the 4V won, and then we also were racing 2 Open 4s in the Open 4 category at NIRC, and they got first and fourth. And we were the only men's program to put a boat on every podium, which is really, really exciting. The guys just did a great job top to bottom. And it's the first time that we've actually had a varsity 8 medal at NIRC since 19 no, that was New England's. The guys medaled at New England's in 1993. So I think it's our first time that the varsity 8 is actually finished on the podium at NIRC.
I was gonna say we're gonna find out what's in the water first, but I wanted to so I wanted to just, mention the, incredible results you guys have had, but I'm curious, George, how did you get into rowing, and how did you become part of the Tufts rowing program?
Oh, great question. It kind of happened the same way that a lot of us get into rowing, where I had been a phenomenal non-athlete all through elementary and middle school. Doing your classic thing, playing t-ball and just noodling around in various sports. In 8th grade, one of my friends said, "Hey, you should try rowing. You could be good at it." And I was like, "Hold on, I've never been good at a sport before." So I started rowing for a small club in southern Minnesota called the Rochester Rowing Club. And then I rowed for 4 years, did a bunch of sculling, was never particularly successful. Tried to walk on my freshman fall at the University of Wisconsin, and through a myriad of different things, largely just not being ready for college, ended up transferring back home to University of Minnesota, where I rowed club for 7 seasons, and loved it. Loved the process of building something. Me and a bunch of my teammates were able to go from pretty bad to solidly mediocre over the course of 4 years. And I thought that was really, really fun. And then we capped it off by trying to take a crack at going to U23 trials, where we were unsuccessful, but had some really, really good racing experience. And
That's awesome.
in the process of getting ready to apply for physical therapy school, I stumbled across some ads for the Institute for Rowing Leadership that was run out of CRI for a long time
Oh, yeah, yep.
by Matt Zatorsky and Matt Lair. And I had just been hooked already at that point. I had started coaching a local youth program my sophomore year of college and really, really, really enjoyed it. So I was trying to figure out a way to continue doing it and not have
That's
more school. And moved out here in 2014, where I volunteered at BU for a year, and then coached the CRI boys for a couple of years, which overlapped with the beginning of coaching at Tufts as a part-time assistant starting in 2015, and then I became one of the full-time assistants in 2017, and the head men's coach in 2019, and then director 2 years ago.
that's wow, that's a nice progression career-wise. So, say you came on full-time in 2019, what's evolved over those last few years? Like, what's been key to that progression of getting better and better each year?
Honestly, I think a lot of it is like training as a whole. It compounds upon itself, and it's not something sudden and different that's happened over the last couple of years, but rather the culmination of the work of hundreds of people over the last few years. Like, none of this exists without Gary Caldwell or Ken Weinstein or Noel Warner or Brian Daw, like all of these guys that were putting the pieces in place. And the final touches, I think, is a lot of institutional support. Tufts as a school, like the support that we've gotten from an athletic perspective has gone up a ton. And then I think it's just getting people slowly ramped up into this idea that we're going to be pretty serious about our preparation and our racing and the excitement around that. And you pair that with having a great boathouse and having an awesome place to train on campus and great strength coaches and good athletic trainers and administrators that support us, and you add all those things together and you can be successful. It's not easy, but at least it's straightforward. There are a lot fewer challenges now than there were 10 years ago when I started, than there were 20, 30 years ago. And I think that's the core of it. It's the culmination of decades of work rather than something brand new that's happening as of now.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were gonna say maybe, like, there's one big factor that changed, but you're saying it's a bunch of little things over a very long period of time.
for sure.
Yeah. So on those results I just mentioned, was there a proudest moment for you?
I mean, I think up to this point, probably had to be it's a toss up, a mix of watching the guys at IRA this last June, or the head of the Charles finish in 2023. I mean, I think that's pretty significant on the men's side. The guys, a Division III program hadn't won that since I believe Williams won in 2011. And taking the podium over a bunch of D1 programs was pretty satisfying for the squad. But it also, it represented like a group of 8 or 10 guys that were very, very self-possessed that fall and came in ready to go in September. Versus the IRA result is definitely a culmination of team effort. And where everybody's eyes are on all year. And the biggest things there is that our 2V is just full of a bunch of young guys that, you're not as mature of a racer when you're a freshman or a sophomore. And the fact that they were able to stay so unflustered as they rode stroke for stroke, basically 2,000 full meters to finish literally a bow ball up on their competition was really, really exciting to see. And then with the varsity, it was just a tight field this year. Like I could have realistically seen us finishing, anywhere from second to fifth in the final. And we saw that in our heat. We had a real Jekyll and Hyde weekend where the guys, we set ourselves up and didn't have our best race on Friday, and they posted the fifth fastest time, and then they were able to flip the script and row a much more like intense piece on Saturday from a better headspace and figure out how to be a little bit more aggressive, a little less regard for their own well-being.
um, yeah, so that they die 1,000 deaths, right, during
Yeah,
that race.
yeah.
So you mentioned something I've been really thinking about, like just researching just how Tufts is doing and looking at the times from some of the crews around the country. I mean, you guys are rivaling some of the best D1 programs. Okay. Um, do you ever think about what it would look like if Tufts were to compete at the D1 level?
I mean, I think about it as I compare our times to other times, but realistically speaking, I mean there are a lot of Olympians in the top end D1 boats. I think it's cool for us to get that touch point in the fall every year where we get to race the Holy Cross and Drexel and St. Joe's and
Yeah.
a number of other Division I programs, but I think I got to be realistic with myself. Like I don't know if we would we wouldn't have any hope if we lined up between Cal and UW and Harvard and Yale. The guys are great guys. They train their absolute butts off, but that'd be a tall order. I think we're probably about 20-25 seconds back on those top crews.
Okay. I mean, is there like a regatta or race on your bucket list where you'd want Tufts to maybe go head to head with some top D1 eights?
I have a really fond memory from college. We went out in April and raced at the Crew Classic. And that was a super cool experience for us and something that was totally different. And there's something about just sitting on the start line underneath the Sea World gondola and waiting for things to go. And every once in a while you'd see like a dolphin come up. That I think would be really, really fun.
So I'm not familiar with that event. What is that all about? Where is that?
It's in Mission Bay in San Diego, and they attract a number of more West Coast schools. So you'll run into
Okay.
Gonzaga and for a while Cal and Yale were doing an invite there. You end up with a lot of the really, really good California club programs there as well.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a fun race.
So you mentioned something just about your boys not having the best race one, but they kind of pulled it together. I mean, how do you have a process for preparing your athletes mentally when you line up for a big race? I mean, we didn't spend much time on this when I was racing in the 90s. It was like, go out and pull as hard as you can. But I'm just curious, do you prepare your folks mentally at all?
I think we really try to create a practice environment that gets them ready for that. So we'll do situations in practice where, we sort of set the stage as like, this is going on in the race. This is what's happening. And for the varsity, a lot of that is making them start down on the 2V.
Mhm.
But rather
Yep.
than just saying like, okay, 2V, take 2 seats, we'll put the 2V up and say, like, all right, you got off the line poorly and you're down on Bates or whoever. Um, and then we try to set the stage to get the guys in the headspace that they might be in, because that's exactly what happened in our heat. Was we had this focus on being loose and not using all of our energy to create the speed that we need in the first 1,000 meters, and Bates kind of punched him in the mouth, and they got a couple of seats through the first 1,000, and the guys in the back of their heads, I could just see it. They were like, wait a minute, this is supposed to be easy. Like, we're down and it still really hurts. And that was the conversation that we had on Saturday. It's like, no matter what you do, it's going to really hurt. It's a freaking 2K. Like, you're going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So there's part of that. And then we'll also run through mindfulness trainings. Our assistant Andy is a certified mindfulness coach. So we'll do thought experiments, quiet sits, visualizations are all part of what we're doing. I don't think we have enough time to do as much of it as I would like. But
Does that person work with other teams at Tufts, or is it just rowing?
Just rowing, yeah.
Oh,
We're
wow.
pretty lucky. He came to us via Riverside, and he has this background in mindfulness. He's got a CSCS. He's got a master's degree in physiology. So he ends up being able to contribute a lot on the science side of things, as well as
Yeah.
being a really good rowing coach too.
Well, so in fairness, when you mentioned that, it just brought back this really vivid memory. We had a visitor when I was rowing at Tufts, named Brad Lewis. He wrote a
Oh yeah,
book called Assault on Lake Casitas,
sure.
and he's a former, I guess, Olympian, right?
Yep.
Um, so he told us about some of his secret sauce about basically getting on the erg, not actually pulling an oar or pulling the erg, but you're sort of visualizing the entire four parts of the race, like the first 500, the second. And
Yeah.
now that we're talking, I remember. So we did do some visualization back then.
The shadow rowing. Yeah, I
Shadow
read
rowing.
that
That's
when I was in college.
yep, yep, good stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about recruiting. When I bumped into you at a bar at the head of the Charles, I asked you, what the average, 2K time was for your boat. And you don't have to share that on the podcast, but I'm just curious, like when you're recruiting um, high school athletes, like what qualities do you look for, I guess, beyond physical ability? Because
Yeah.
obviously a great erg score is fantastic, but
Yeah.
what do you guys look for?
That's interesting because it's sort of changed over the last bunch of years as we've learned more. Nobody teaches you how to recruit or who to recruit or tells you what necessarily works well at the program that you're at. So I think it's an ever evolving thing for me. But generally speaking, we're looking for a couple of things, even more than your race results or your erg scores. One is simply like your frame. You can't. It's the one thing that we can't teach. Like, we can't teach big, and rowing undeniably is helped by being tall and having good lever length. So, like I like having kids on campus to meet them because I'm like, how long is your tib fib? Like, how long are you going to be able to stay on the legs, or like how long are your arms relative to your body? That's something that I really pay a lot of attention to.
Oh,
And then
wow.
for the intangible things, um, there are a few things that I've noticed be really successful at Tufts. One is guys that just love to move. You don't have to love rowing. In fact, sometimes I feel like that's kind of a negative if the only thing that you're in it for is rowing. because we're only together for 5 months of the year. I need guys who are gonna like be out of season climbing mountains and
Yep.
cross country skiing and swimming and running, and like guys that are gonna go on vacation and it's so part of their core existence that they're gonna like wake up every morning and go for a run or whatever it is. The enthusiasm around training, I think, is the number one most important piece with all of this, because if you don't have that, it makes our existence like really, really hard.
Well, how
Uh,
do you dig into that? Like, do you ask them to put that on a resume? Like, what do you do in the off season?
it kind of, we just like talk about it.
Talk
And
about it.
you
Yeah.
get the sense, at this point, I've probably talked to 1,000 kids over the last bunch of years. And you can just see, like, when you ask them questions about the kind of training and the kind of exercise that they like to do, some of these kids just say kind of flat. And some of them, like, get on the edge of their seat and they're really, really excited to tell you
Yeah.
about X, Y, and Z. Um, it ends up, very rarely do you have a kid that just is like, oh, all I want to do is row all year. And we've had guys like that just love the erg and that's their core identity. And they like really, really love to get fit and do well on the rowing machine. But for the most part, like the fastest guys over the last bunch of years, like we had a captain who explicitly would go home after the season was over and take like 2 months off of rowing, and all he would do is ride his bike and run, and he just knew that he needed that for his head, but he would always come back and be one of the fastest guys right away, and then have this higher ceiling through the year because he had done some cross
Yeah.
training. He had allowed
That's
his
the
body
school of
to
thought. That's the school of thought that I subscribe to. You got to mix it up.
yeah.
So you made no mention, I don't know if it was purposeful, but do you care about grades or SAT scores?
Oh, big time. Yeah. Yes.
Because I understand that like the Tufts rowing team had they have a number of athletes that were all scholastic, or I forget what the actual word was, but basically they're wicked smart as well as like
Yeah.
amazing athletes.
Yeah, it's kind of unthinkable to me, actually. I'm a state school guy, so I don't know if I could survive in the academic environment that these kids are in. But we have numerous kids 3.9 4.0s. Our average GPA every single year that I've been here has been 3.6 or higher. And
Wow.
I think part of that is that's where the recruiting process starts. You sort of have to clear the threshold of what Tufts is looking for academically, in order to really do anything from a recruiting standpoint.
So let's say you have a fresh batch of freshmen coming in, and you want to start taking them under your wing, get them in the program.
Yeah.
How do you approach training these young blossoming endurance athletes? Do you get them on a program like a periodization program? What do you guys do?
That's a good question. The biggest differences for the freshmen, now versus how it was even 10 years ago, is that a lot of them already have quite a bit of experience rowing. So we try to fold them in immediately in their freshman fall in September. So we actually go out of our way to do mostly mixed boat rowing all of September, where we'll get, you'll have two guys from the returning 1V in there with a bunch of guys from the 2V, the 3V, the 4V, and preferentially working the freshmen in so that they can pick up the rhythm that we want them to row. Because I think that's one of the hardest parts with the current state of things, is that they come in and the best boat that they've ever rowed in now happened in June of the previous year. So inevitably, the first month of their rowing in college, probably not going to feel better than that felt. Like, we're asking them to make a lot of changes. We're asking them to be open-minded about it. So that's something that we start priming in April of their senior year, letting them know, like, hey, this is going to happen. You got to be ready to make some changes to be able to row with the group, to get better with the group. And then the other big thing is we have this strength program that's part of our training program, where we'll lift twice a week with our varsity strength coach, who is fantastic, has a huge appetite to learn about the needs of rowing. And his big functions, are one, teaching the guys how to move better, how to be coached better, two, giving them better, stability and range of motion so that the rate of injury goes down. We introduced the strength program 6 years ago, and the number of broken ribs and the number of back injuries has gone down a ton. Uh,
Wow.
since they've spent time in the weight room. But then a lot of these kids, like, they just don't know how to lift. Like, youth rowing in the US is still behind in strength training quite a bit. So we're teaching them how to, correctly front squat so that then we can teach them how to correctly do a power clean or a hang clean.
Yep.
They need to learn how to stack their spine up so that they can safely do a hex bar deadlift.
Mhm.
And all of these things tend to yield some really good technical changes on the water as well. In my mind, a power clean is basically just the rowing stroke rotated 90 degrees.
Yep.
And a lot of the hip mechanics are the same. And if you can do a power clean well, you can probably accelerate through the drive pretty well. But I'm sort of in this school of thought that, like, the aerobic side of training, you can't focus on until you have the strength training down,
Oh,
the strength
interesting.
side of it pretty well. It's like, what good is it to row 10,000 bad strokes?
Yep.
If you can't even take one bad stroke, what are we doing making you do like mountains of steady state?
Yep.
So then the other transition that we'll do is we start the fall off with some of this pretty controlled UT1 high handle force, like muscular endurance work, something like 12 by 3 minutes with a minute of rest at rate 22, where there's plenty of rest built in between each stroke, where the guys can, like, really focus on letting the hands come over, getting the body set well, getting everything set up so that when you get to the catch, there's as little movement as possible. And then you can just, like, hoss on each
Yep.
stroke quite a bit without hitting this, like, total lactate failure where your technique goes out the window. Um, and then we can start building up. I think the other big change for us, for the freshmen, and this has been a change that we made last year, is focusing on the length of connected stroke as a huge part of it, and measuring that, whether it's on the water with a peach system, seeing how many degrees of effective arc and connected arc the guys are taking with each stroke, or on the rowing machine, there's a way that you can measure the length of your connected stroke. So we've got length targets for the whole squad to be hitting so that when we get on the water, it's easier to mash up. If everybody's rowing a stroke that's 1.45 meters long, you chuck them in a boat and it's easier to match up everything.
Mm. So you mentioned the peach system, which some listeners might not know, but I think it's a system that's used for rowing in a boat that you can measure things like wattage and stroke length.
Yep.
And it's fascinating because, several years ago, you really had no idea what watts each person was pulling.
Yeah.
And now, do you have that data real time? Like, can a cox see that? Can a coach see that real time?
So the coxswain can see it real time.
Wow.
Right now, we don't have the screens in each seat, but that's something that we're going to get for next year, so that the guys can see stroke for stroke, like an erg screen. It'll give you a power curve. It'll give you, the big things that we're looking for are the degrees of arc. We got a set length that we're looking for, and then with the degrees of arc, you see how many degrees of your stroke length you're actually connected and doing effective work. So it doesn't matter
Wow.
if you're rowing a 90-degree arc, but only 60 degrees of it is effective. Like, doesn't really it doesn't really matter that you're rowing a long enough arc if your blade's not in the water and your body weight's not suspended off of it.
It's like these incremental gains. I mean, I assume by you mentioning this on the podcast that other crews are aware of this, these metrics and this data, and this is something we all strive for.
Definitely, definitely.
I mean, the thing that I always found super challenging as an athlete and being a member of a crew is, how do you peak together? Right? So you have successfully peaked together in multiple races to win or podium these races. So as a coach slash trainer, you really have to balance the rest period, between hard workout days. Um, But you seem to have found the magic sauce with, like, for example, the head of the Charles, like, getting everybody to peak for that.
Yeah.
I mean, you must have, like, a perfectly calibrated calendar with when you're gonna do the 3 by 20s or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
and then when you're gonna back off.
Well, and I think some of it is I don't want to call it good luck, but the core of the plan I feel like is very simple, and we don't change a lot year to year, so that we can run a little bit of a better experiment. We can tweak things slowly. So the format of the training that we're running is something that I had started doing in 2017 with a group of lightweights that I was coaching at CRI that were that lulled me into a false sense of security that I knew what I was doing. They were just really good, and I was like, oh, I guess this is it. And it's all based on not necessarily the periodization of work, but polarization of work, and really thinking hard about how much hard work we're going to do, when we're going to do it, what kind of hard work we're going to do. Because, I rode, and I'm sure that you experienced this too, in an era where it was just, you like do as much AT as you can possibly handle. You're pulling as
Yep.
hard as you can all the time. And it does a good job of sorting for people who are insane. And it makes you pretty good at racing. It makes you pretty tough. But, so many of us experienced this, where, you're like, my 2K kind of stinks, but like my 6K is good and my 10K is great. It's like, oh yeah,
Yep.
it's because all we're doing is AT preparation. Um, and the shift in this school of thought that I've seen over the last bunch of years is that you spend most of the year working on these energy systems that are slow to adapt, your strength and your low intensity cardio.
Uh-huh.
So we do probably like 90% of our training is going to be low intensity cardio. But it's tricky because you don't want to do too much of that on the water. What we found is if we have guys try to heart rate moderate their steady state on the water, never feels quite right because the boat just needs to have a requisite amount of pressure.
Hmm.
And some crews can skillfully row rate 18 at heart rate 150, but most of the crews that I've seen out there can't it can't really manage it that well. Um,
Oh, wow.
so
Yeah.
instead getting a lot of this volume at controlled heart rates, either on the erg, rowing on slides, or supplementing with cross training, whether it's biking, cross country skiing, running, doing the Harvard steps, whatever it is. And that, I think part of what the peak that's been working has been holding off on racing intensity until the last possible moment, and knowing that for the most part we can hit our peak in about 6 to 8 weeks once we introduce that. But if we go too early, then we're just going to be trying to hang on to a peak for too long, and nobody can
Yep.
manage that. And
No, I was gonna say I have a couple of friends who live by this philosophy where they maintain this high level of fitness and they're always ready. All they need is 6 weeks to get ready for a race. Like, they're like, "6 weeks, I can get sharp enough for a race, but I'm gonna maintain this high baseline of, physical activity and fitness." So, you're saying something sort of similar. Yeah,
and
that's
I you know
cool.
I see it every year. And um you know I know that what we're doing is working pretty well, but I don't know that it's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
It's
How do you,
certainly.
how do you balance, like, just straight up, like, erg time and watts per kilogram versus what one of my previous coaches called sort of like the chi or the juju of the boat? Like, does it come down to seat racing? Like, how do you
I
get
think,
like the fastest boat?
yeah. And this is something I really struggle with. I think every coach really struggles with how to run selection. And some coaches, and I've tried this, where you try to lay down this very systematic approach where you're like, okay, you hit these X, Y, and Z, and then you're in the boat. And I've done that, and it always yields a 2V that's beating the 1V. Uh, and my response to this is instead just like, I view myself as I'm sort of the machine that takes in all of the data and pushes out hypotheses. So I'm all about gathering tons of different kinds of data and then trying things out. Sometimes it's a seat race to see if I can make a good combination, but sometimes it's just like, hey, I've seen this group of guys do all of these things well. Let's put together a lineup and see how it goes. And sometimes you put that out there and you're like, oh my God, that's it. Like, and the guys know it, we know it. So a couple of
That's
the things, I
interesting.
mean, taking the data on the erg is important. With that, I really am looking for trajectory too. If you're a guy that's like beating himself consistently, that's a pretty good measure. We'll do this step test till failure on the erg. And that tells you a little bit about the mental piece. That's very interesting. It doesn't line up super closely with how guys rank on the squad.
Is that like you're increasing the watts every minute until failure?
Yeah, so you increase the watts every 5 minutes until you fail, and then with each 5 minute step, every 30 seconds that you survive, you get another 3 watts added to your score. So there's
Got
this
it.
incentive to like, okay, I just got to make it to the next chunk. I just got to make it to the next.
So does that test, because I just did one of these for cycling and it was every minute increases and the test lasts about, 12 to 18 minutes.
Yeah.
Does your test last like 40 minutes?
The starting point is high enough that most
Okay.
guys, like 18 is about the average, but there's some guys
Okay.
that'll make it, yeah, like 35, 40 minutes into this. Some of the top guys, it's pretty, I mean, it's some classic, like old school rowing is sufferfest. But you find the guys who are able to extend themselves beyond their means. And then I know that in the back of my head. And those guys are typically, we see the ones that make the biggest leaps within the year are the guys that have the biggest difference between their ranking on their all their other erg scores and their step test results.
Wow.
Then we have multiple different forms of erg test results. We'll do stuff on a static erg. We'll do stuff on dynamic erg. We do rate controlled stuff. We do open rate stuff. And that gives you a little bit of a wider picture on how each athlete is physiologically. Then we'll do these force matrices that the whole goal is you make a ton of switches over the course of 8 different pieces, and it gives you a gray code of data within the workout where you've made every possible combination, and then the ranking isn't necessarily you directly beating somebody, but instead it's your total time over the course of the workout.
Oh,
And then that all of that information gives us sort of a rough idea of where people should go, and then we can do the final cut, like the more specific seat racing and eights, which I struggle with because there are a lot of variables when you're racing in eights. So if you're going to do that, I feel like you need to control things as much as possible. So we'll do something like 4x1,000 meters. You run the first piece, you switch the 2 guys that you're looking at, then you run the middle 2 pieces, and then you switch them back.
uh,
And the winner of that then is the one who has the faster total time through the 4 pieces. Because inevitably,
interesting.
when you have 2 eights out there, there's going to be some fall off from guy 1 to guy 16. And typically, where that fall off is from a fitness standpoint. So the 2V is going to bleed off speed more than the varsity. So you need to have both guys have 2 pieces in each boat. But I had done it in the past where it was, you do 2 pieces and then you switch and you do the last 2 pieces. And the guy that you switch from the 1V to the 2V in that format just always gets killed.
Oh my God, this is an incredibly thoughtful process. Are the women side of the program doing the same sort of metrics and testing and analysis?
Yep.
Wow. You mentioned something which I wasn't familiar with. What is the difference between a static and dynamic test?
Oh yeah, so it's all about if the erg is sliding or not. So a standard concept 2, that's going to be a static erg where your body weight is moving back and forth relative to the machine, versus if you put it on sliders, like concept 2 sells sliders where then you can put the erg on it and your body weight stays static in place and the erg is moving back and forth, which is more
Yeah, I've seen those.
similar to the way that the boat moves. Row Perfect is sort of the highest level available version of a dynamic erg like that, and sort of the gold standard. But they're pretty expensive. So, and
Which
not
one produces a faster score?
the dynamic erg tends to produce a faster score, and the longer the piece, the bigger of an advantage it gives you.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
Simply because you're turning around the machine, which doesn't weigh as much as your body weight, and there's a lot less weight on your back, basically. So we'll do a lot of
Yeah.
our volume on the dynamic ergs. But based on what I know, like I sort of consider both of them cross training for rowing. Neither are a good pure representation of rowing. And I haven't been able to find this study since I was in the IRL, but we talked about some like Belgian biomechanical study from the 2010s where they were looking at the muscular recruitment in regards to producing speed on water, on a dynamic, and on a static erg. And on a static erg, if you break it up into your three sort of large muscular components, your legs, your trunk, and your arms, the contribution to speed on a static erg was something like 50% legs, 30% trunk, 20% arms. And then in the middle was rowing on the water at 70, 20, 10. And then the dynamic erg favored legs more. It was something like 80, 15,
Oh,
5,
wow.
that effect. So that's a little bit about why I feel like we should test both, because
That's really interesting.
in the past I had done like a year where all we did was erg and test on the static, and that didn't really work. And then all we did was test and erg on the dynamic, and that also didn't really work. Like it didn't really select what I was looking for. So getting both sets of data helped me figure out who was in the middle. And the good thing about the dynamic erg is that it only gives you a boost if you row with good rhythm. So if somebody asked me, like, okay, you can only do dynamic erging or you can only do static erging, I would say dynamic, but then you miss this component of upper body strength that's
Mhm.
necessary to like hang from the handle, and I think especially in sweep, be able to lever through the oar to the back end.
Yeah. Do you accept walk-ons anymore?
Yeah. The every year we'll have a couple of people reach out. I got to say it's pretty tough, but I'm never going to turn away a guy with good energy, good frame, good athletic background. We got two rising seniors right now that are walk-ons that are absolutely smashing it. In
What
2020,
sport did they come from? I'm curious, like, about these success stories of
yeah,
walk-ons. Like,
one was a pitcher, a baseball pitcher. And I mean, talk about hip mechanics and pop and strength. And that, like, what I see move best into rowing isn't actually people who have heavy aerobic backgrounds. They're people who have good, like, sprint backgrounds, good hip mechanics, wrestlers are
interesting.
fantastic rowers, hockey players. Um, we've got an incoming kid. He does row once a year, but he plays football in the fall, and like the hip mechanics and the strength of him, basically being a blocking tight end. Like the guy is just a hoss as a result, and you can make him aerobic. Um, but our two kids on the squad, one was a pitcher, and then the other one was a short distance swimmer, and I think he ran the 800 in high school. But the
Oh,
summer before he started rowing at Tufts, he did at least one full length Ironman. I want to say he did two, but those two guys are pretty exceptional. And then in 2022, the first year that there was the D3 IRA, our guys went and got second, and two of those guys in the boat had been walk-ons, and one was a wrestler and one was a quarterback. And those two guys, I mean, were fantastic, like exceptional guys. They were the 2 seed and the
that's
7 seed of the varsity 8 that year. And then on the women's squad, there's been a huge amount of success with walk-ons over the last bunch of years. Like walk-on kids in each of these boats that won the NCAA championship over the last 2 years. One of them, I think, was a volleyball player, and then I can't remember off the top of my head the other sports that the other kids came from. But kids that learned how to row at Tufts.
all right. So listen, whoever's listening out there and they're applying to schools, and because I have a senior that just applied to school, you don't get recruited. Don't give up hope. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
um, so when I went to the alumni row, and we're going to start winding down the podcast here, but you mentioned something about Tufts the rowing team sort of giving back to the community a bit. One thing you mentioned was struck with me was you helped clean the Mystic River.
Yeah.
Is that true? And is that something that you're proud of? And are there other things that you do as a program to give back to the community? I'm curious.
Definitely proud of it. Can't take credit for it. We have a bunch of community liaisons on the team, and it's actually a course that the university has developed where you can take it, you can get credit for it. And we have a bunch of kids that were already interested in that, and they've just like done an amazing job this year. They actually ended up winning an award at our end of the year full athletic department banquet for the work that they've done as a group. And they were responsible for working with the Mass Watershed group. And we've done it every year for the last, I think, 7 years. So we get out there in early April and get out in kayaks and coaching launches and pull out tires and
Oh, wow.
all sorts of garbage, whatever you can imagine, we'll find it in the Malden. And it's, since we spend so much time out there every single day, it's a really, really big part of something that we just care about. And the Malden was a pretty gross place when I started 10 years ago, and it's definitely much better now than
So
it had.
do you row in the Mystic River, or is it called the Malden River?
So the Malden feeds into the Mystic.
Okay.
We technically row on the Malden, but if you're rowing a small enough boat, you can sneak through Medford Square and then go up the Mystic River and row up into the Mystic Lakes. And
Oh, yeah. Yep.
every fall, we'll take a bunch of singles up there to Shannon Beach on the Mystic Lakes and do
Yep.
some testing to make sure that kids can get back in the boats if they turn over. And you don't want to do it on the Malden. You can technically swim in the water, but it's much better to be in the Mystic Lakes for that.
Oh, speaking of beach, we interviewed Brendan Mulvey with the head of the Charles a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
and he mentioned something about beach sprints, which the head of the Charles is running an event later in July. I'm wondering if anybody from the Tufts rowing team is training for beach sprints.
Funny that you ask. Alumni Sarah Busey just qualified for the U.S. Beach Sprints World Championship team. She and her partner won the mixed double, and she was a walk-on in 2016, I believe, her sophomore year, and
Wow.
and is going to be at the World Championship. And I believe she's also rowing at the World Championship trials here coming up. But not only is there somebody doing it, but they're doing it at the highest level.
Controversial question here coming at you. What do you think of these beach sprints shenanigans? They look interesting, or?
Honestly, I think it looks fun. I was a hesitant doubter to begin with, but after watching the live feeds of it, it kind of looks like a blast. And I'm under no illusion. I don't think that rowing is a particularly spectator-friendly sport for the most part. It's obviously this great, rewarding thing to be a part of. But I think there's a chance that the beach sprints can capture a different audience and really add to the rowing community as a whole. And now that it's been built out over a bunch of years, I think it's kind of fun.
Well, you might have to field the team. It might be coming collegiately. I got two final questions. What's your favorite rowing event, or actually endurance event in New England?
Yep.
That's my first question.
Oh man, in New England. I was going to say I have an easy answer for overall. But in New England, I think my favorite rowing event is the Green Mountain Head in Putney, Vermont. It is just such a blast. I don't know if I know that there was a year without the stake turn, but when the program was smaller, Noel Warner would take the squad up with Brian Daw, and they do this crazy stake turn 5K. And I ended up racing it one year, and it was an absolute blast. You're just like out in the middle of a cornfield. For some reason, you got, like elite level rowers there. So you're surrounded by a bunch of Olympians. The Craftsbury group comes up. And then as part of your entry fee, you get this locally baked bread and sourced, sharp cheddar cheese and there were these incredible egg rolls. I mean, it was, if you win,
Oh,
you get apple cider and you get donuts and apples. It was awesome. I really, really love that race.
that sounds cool. But now you piqued my interest. What was the one nationwide you would recommend?
That's so my favorite rowing race of all time is called Death Row, and it's run at a Duluth Rowing Club in Minnesota. And we'd go up every summer, or sorry, every fall when I was in high school and in college, and we'd race it. And it's any boat class can enter. It's a mass start in the Lake Superior Bay, and then the entire group, sometimes 50, 100 boats would mass start on this line, and then it's this 2K frenzy up into a funnel into a bridge that puts you out on the St. Louis River, and then it's 23 more K for 25 total K of rowing upstream, and it ends at the president's house of the Duluth Rowing Club. So you pull off on the dock, all of the trailers drive over there, and then you have a picnic and everybody hangs out. And people are finishing or crossing the line, some anywhere between 2 and 4 hours, and it's just an awesome way for the Midwest rowing community, the Minnesota rowing community to come together. And it's just such a pure, talking about endurance events. There's no fanfare to it. It's just a bunch of people rowing hard for a long time, and that's
Wow,
super fun.
that is incredible. Death row. I'm gonna have to Google that.
Yeah.
um, Final question: what is next for Tufts Rowing? Are there any goals or projects that you're especially excited about right now?
I think we've been talking about this a lot now that the year is wrapped up, and a lot of it is continuing to try to optimize what we're doing, figure out the best ways that we can give the kids a really good experience. And for such a long time, we've set our goals around these like competitive objectives, training objectives. And it's a little bit of a privilege to be in this spot where we can talk a little bit more about I don't want to say the subjective objectives, the cultural objectives of the
Uh-huh.
team a little bit more. And we're the primary focus this year is around figuring out how to completely unify such a big group. With 50 kids on each team, 100 total kids, it's harder to unify such a large group with varying interests, varying priorities. And that's what we've settled on for next year as the primary goal, to try to
Yeah.
figure out this way to homogenize the thinking within the group a little bit more. And
It's sort of like you're thinking like a CEO within a company where you're trying to build culture that's going to have ramifications for many years to come.
exactly, and that we want to. It's exactly what's on my mind, so that then we can use this unity focus to like dovetail into the building out of more alumni events like the one that you were
Uh-huh.
at this spring, and have a community that's more involved, more excited, more. And I think a lot of that falls on us, is making sure that everybody knows that we're building this, or like we're helping to build this thing that a lot of you guys have been a part of, and making sure that we push out the bat signal to welcome everybody back in who hasn't been
Yep.
around for a while, because it's cool, it's special, but none of it exists without the people that came before us, and making sure that our year to year message of unification is also blasted out to the full group, and
Yep.
and and getting everybody involved, because quite simply we just we can't do it on our own. um,
Yeah, from like a strategic planning perspective, you've got your vision, you've got your mission, and you have your values, right, of your organization. And then you have all these tactical things you do to support that. It could be things like team dinners or community events or getting everybody on a Slack channel, or we're going out for a hike in the off season. Like it
yeah,
sounds like those are the things you're going to be building.
for sure, for sure. And again, it's a little bit of a privileged position. For such a
Yep.
long time, it had to be like, okay, what's the goal for this year? Get everybody training. Or what's the goal for this year? We're going to try to make the A final at X, Y, and Z by doing these things. And now we're in a position where everybody that comes in and everybody that's in the program, that's just like understood. So we don't need to talk about it or focus on it. And that was, I think, one of the interesting transitions that we got to make early on. Was I remember some of our early phase guys in 2015, 2016, they were telling me about this, the Tufts gene. And Noel and I were like, what the heck is the Tufts gene? And the guys said, it's an expectation to lose any competition that we're in. And we're like, all right, we got to move on from this, fellas. And watching that group of guys grow and become the group that, made the NIRC grand final for the first time in a long time, being able to then build that inherent belief. Now that work's done, so we can do something else.
Wow. So I'm going to end on that note, and I want to thank you, George. This was an incredible episode. I learned a ton. You revealed probably 90% of your secret sauce to the world. Thanks for taking us behind the scenes of the Tufts Rowing program. You and your team have built something super special, and it was fun to learn about it. And I want to wish you and the folks at the women's program and the men's program and on all the supporting best of luck in the coming years. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And also want to thank, we have a couple of sponsors. We have Lark Fine Foods, which is a 100% women-owned business up on the North Shore. They make these delicious small batch cookies. And also The Everyday Athlete, a book about balancing work, family, and fitness. And it sounds like you're grooming everyday athletes, which is awesome. And to learn more about Tufts Rowing, the way I learn about it is I get on their newsletter, but I also follow them on Instagram. And we will tag them in our Instagram post here on the podcast. And thanks again for listening to the New England Endurance Podcast. And until next time, get out there, keep pushing your limits, drop some hammers, and enjoy and explore the beautiful terrain of New England. Thanks.